This case is perhaps the most tragic of all cave-related deaths. On the chilly, windy Friday morning of January 30th, 1925, a 37-year-old Kentucky farmer and intrepid cave explorer named Floyd Collins squeezed his lanky, raw-boned, 160-pound frame deep into a cave he had discovered a few miles from his Barron County home, just outside of Cave City. He was searching not for adventure, but for hope for a new life. Just down the road, Mammoth Cave attracted thousands of tourists. Caves for the new automobile traveler had become a cash crop in Kentucky. Still, not just any cave would do. 8 years earlier, Floyd had discovered one of Kentucky's most beautiful caves. He had named it Crystal Cave for the gypsum flowers that shined like crystals when his lantern light settled on them. But Crystal was too remote for most tourists. Floyd believed that his latest discovery, an opening he called Sand Cave, might lead into Mammoth, like a tributary feeding into a river. If it did, surely a steady team of tourists in fame and fortune lay just beyond the darkness. On this morning, he descended into the shaft as he had done on other days, crawling homeward some 120 feet from the entrance and 55 feet underground. He knocked over his oil lamp and was plunged into total darkness. Floyd squirmed headfirst toward the cave's mouth until with one thrust, his foot dislodged an overhanging boulder from the cave wall. The boulder fell, pinning his left ankle in a narrow crevice. The more he fought to free himself, the more rock and debris he tore loose. Soon, the cave held him in an ever-tightening vice. Floyd, who had been crawling into caves since boyhood, had been in tight spots before, but never one in which he felt so helpless. His hands had become scraped and bloody from clawing at the rocks. Icy snowmelt dripped through the cave ceiling onto his face. The damp ground in the 54-degree Fahrenheit chamber chilled him. Even knowing that it would be hours before family and friends missed him, he yelled for help until he lost his voice. Along with his thoughts, surely one memory crisscrossed through his mind. A day earlier, he had told his stepmother, Miss Jane, that he'd dreamed about being trapped by a rock in his new cave, and angels had come for him. About his latest discovery, she had warned, "Don't go back in there, Floyd." On Saturday morning, neighbors found Floyd's coat hanging just inside the entrance to the cave. They crawled through the narrow passage until they heard him cry out, and then set about gathering a rescue team. Floyd's younger brother, Homer, was one of the first to reach him. Floyd's body, pinned tightly between the cave's walls, blocked Homer's attempts to reach his foot. The best Homer could do was scrape some dirt away, feed him sausages and coffee, and place an oilcloth over his face to relieve the torture of the incessantly dripping cold water. He watched his brother slip in and out of consciousness and heard him say over and over, "Take me home to bed, Homer." Later, to another neighbor who crawled in, Floyd said, "I'm trapped for life." On day 3 of the entrapment, the Louisville Courier-Journal dispatched a 21-year-old reporter named William "Skeets" Miller to the scene. When he arrived at the cave, Miller asked Homer for details. Homer, his nerves frayed and body weary, snapped, "If you want information, there's the hole right over there. You can go down and find out for yourself." Later, Miller said, "I was ashamed not to go." Terrified, yet spurred by his journalistic duty, Miller entered the cave with Homer, not knowing that soon his life would be inextricably and forever linked to that of the trapped man. Reporter William "Skeets" Miller visited the trapped Collins and chronicled the tragedy. His descriptions of Floyd's plight riveted the nation. Floyd Collins is suffering torture almost beyond description. He has been in agony every conscious moment since he was trapped. Before I could see his face, I was forced to raise a small piece of oilcloth covering it. "Put it back," he said. "Put it back, the water!" I tried to squirm over Collins' body to reach the rock until he begged me to get off. "It hurts awful," he said. Collins is lying on his back, resting more on the left side. His 2 arms are held fast in the crevice beside his body, so that he really is in a natural straitjacket. Each day's papers brought new stories from Miller, the only reporter to reach Floyd's side. His words went out to more than 1,200 Associated Press-affiliated newspapers and became the historical and emotional witness to the struggle to free Floyd from his tomb. Readers followed the excruciating rescue attempts. One involved yanking a rope attached to a harness around Floyd's torso until he screamed, "Stop! It's pulling me in two!" Miller himself tried in vain to rig a jack under a crowbar in a desperate effort to pry loose the rock. Through it all, the reporter gave the trapped man a voice and an uncommon dignity in what has been called the most unusual interview in the history of American journalism. One man talking, one man listening in a dark hole, lit only by a dim light. I prayed as hard as I could, and sometimes I would be in a stupor. I could hear people coming in, but they seemed far away. I dreamed of angels. I have faced death before. It doesn't frighten me, but it is so long. Oh God, be merciful. I know I'm going to get out. I feel it. Something tells me to be brave, and I'm going to be. Tell everybody outside that I love every one of them, and tell them that I am not going to give up. In the early hours of the fifth day, the cave's walls collapsed, cutting Floyd off from his rescuers, from food, and from hope. The last words rescuers heard from him were, "You're too slow, too slow." Yet they didn't give up. In a race against time, engineers concentrated all their efforts into sinking a shaft that would lead to Floyd's chamber. If they could dig 2 feet an hour, there was a chance. But the muck and rock fought back. Sometimes they advanced only a few inches per hour. A rift developed between the locals and the outside experts. Homer insisted that the only way to get Floyd out alive was to continue through the cave's entrance. He became so insistent that state officials barred him from the cave. On Sunday, February 8th, in a tragic and bizarre twist of fate, Floyd himself became the tourist attraction he had sought for so long, as thousands of curious people roamed the area. Everyone seemed to want to be a part of America's most compelling story. Vendors sold balloons, hot dogs, pies, and snake oil remedies. Traffic was backed up for miles. The rescue dragged on for another week, finally ending on February 16th, when a worker made his way down the shaft and shined a light on Floyd's corpse. A physician estimated that somehow Floyd had stayed alive until only a few days earlier. The nation's press departed. The curious followed. The state claimed that it was too dangerous to remove the body, but Homer hired miners to bring Floyd home. On April 26th, Floyd was laid to rest again in a grave beside Flint Ridge family homestead. But he would not find peace for more than 60 years. Floyd's father sold Crystal Cave to a local dentist. The dentist had Floyd's body placed in a glass-topped casket inside the cave on June 13, 1927. It was a heavily advertised tourist trap. Crowds of visitors would peer through a little window at the doomed cave explorer's corpse. A tombstone was installed next to it that included its epitaph, "Greatest cave explorer ever known." In March 1929, the body disappeared. It was found hours later with the help of bloodhounds at the edge of the Green River. The remains, one leg was missing, were returned to the cave. In 1961, Crystal Cave was sold to the federal government, which now inherited the sticky problem of what to do with the body. They let it lie. Floyd was still in the cave. Over time, Floyd's relatives pressured the National Park Service to release his body for burial near the ancestral home. On March 24, 1989, the body was buried for the final time at the Mammoth Cave Baptist Church Cemetery on Flint Ridge. The cave's entrance gaped like a dark, jagged mouth. 3 boys on a field trip crouched down and crept inside. It was a crisp autumn morning in the sprawling park. A perfect day to go exploring. No one dreamed that the fun excursion would end with the muffled cries for help. For the next 24 hours, the nation's attention was riveted to the life-or-death struggle inside Wildcat Cave at Whip's Ledges in the Hinckley Reservation. 16 young people and 3 teachers from the Methodist Children's Home in Berea planned to depart on October 5, 1965 for Schönbrunn Village in Tuscarawas County. However, their bus had a flat tire, causing a delay. This led the organizers to head instead to nearby Medina County Reservation, managed by Cleveland Metro Parks. 15-year-old Morris Batesold and 2 of his friends decided to explore Wildcat Cave, a natural formation in sandstone. The entrance, measuring 15 feet wide and 4 feet tall, led to a narrow passage that ran about 80 feet before opening into a large chamber that local tradition maintained was a 19th century hiding place for escaped slaves en route to Canada. Batesold crawled over a boulder and mistakenly entered a crevice off the main tunnel. The 110-pound, 5'7" boy slithered into the damp, slippery fissure and tumbled headfirst into a 9-inch crack, pinning his hips and body. He couldn't budge. "Help!" he called his 2 pals. "I'm stuck!" The boys raced to get a teacher, who squeezed into the cave and tried to use his belt to lasso the boy's ankle. As the teacher pulled, the belt broke and Batesold wedged deeper into the crevice. Sirens wailed in Hinckley as Fire Chief Paul Chodera led a squad to Wildcat Cave. But the men were unable to extract the boy with hooks. Hopes dimmed for a quick rescue. Firefighters installed a portable generator to light the cave and crews piped oxygen to the boy. Contractors offered to drill through 36 feet of stone, but geologists feared a cave-in. Dynamite was ruled out too. All attempts to extract the boy extended into the night, which became the most horrific of his life. The temperature dropped below freezing, and more than 200 rescuers, spectators, relatives, and reporters gathered at the scene. The Hinckley Auxiliary Fire Team and a garden club handed out hot coffee and chili soups. As day turned to night, the Hinckley Firemen's Auxiliary and Hinckley Garden Club supplied hot coffee, soup, and chili. The American Red Cross and Salvation Army set up camps. The story of the trapped kid became front-page news across the country and the subject of national television programs. Radio broadcasts asked for help from little people, so Evelyn Pinky Petite, a 5'2", 85-pound nurse from Akron, drove to the cave and wriggled into the passage. She could get no closer than 5 feet, but spent nearly 3 hours comforting the boy. Experienced cave explorer Terry Brown of Akron rigged an impromptu pulley with a metal ring spiked to the roof of the cave. Rescuers pulled and tugged, but Batesold moved only a few inches. "His spirits are okay and will be all right as long as he doesn't pass out," Brown told the Beacon Journal. "As soon as we can get his hips loose, we'll get him out of there." All night long, rescuers kept trying to cheer up the boy. They asked if he had a girlfriend. They promised him a steak dinner. They made him count to 25 and back again. Volunteers tried various methods to reach Batesold. Dozens of little people offered assistance and many entered the cave but couldn't get close enough. In the morning, the U.S. Air Force flew a team from the National Speleological Society in Washington, D.C. By then, Batesold had gone more than 24 hours without food or water. Machinist Curtis Peck and his uncle Paul Peck devised a plan to put loops of rope over the teen, pour a glycerin solution on him and make him slippery, and then lift him out on a support board. Akron firefighters Jim and Robert Howe designed the straps. The DC squad supervised the operation with the aid of Eagle Scout Michael Ulrich, 15, of North Royalton, who squirmed into the crevice. "I threw a rope on him and he was able to pull it over his arms," Ulrich later told reporters. "Before that, I had tied a rope around one ankle and then got another rope around both legs." Morris lay on his right side and could only use one arm. It was pretty tight and scary in there. Batesold slipped a few times, but with firm tugging from above, he broke free. Hearty cheers arose as the boy was wrapped in a blanket and lifted out of the passage more than 24 hours after the ordeal began. Hundreds of spectators applauded while the kid was loaded into the waiting ambulance. Batesold was taken to Medina Community Hospital, treated for exhaustion, a severe bruise on his shin, and cuts and bruises on his arms and legs. He also enjoyed a large meal. In an interview at the hospital, he admitted that he hadn't believed he would survive the cave. He said, "When they couldn't get the rope on me, I thought I was done for. I was really scared and thought it was hopeless." The boy repeatedly thanked the hundreds of volunteers who helped in his rescue. When asked if he would ever return to a cave, he replied, "Not anytime soon." Just hours after his rescue, the Park Service blew up the rear entrance to Wildcat Cave and sealed it with concrete forever. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and be sure to subscribe. That would be the best way to show your appreciation. And I'll see you in the next videos.